Thousands of people in the western United States are spending the weekend in evacuation centres as wildfires continue to burn across the region. More than 80 large wildfires in 13 states have destroyed around 1.3 million acres in recent weeks. Our North America correspondent, Peter Bowes, has the report.
The Dixie wildfire, California's biggest blaze to the north of the state, is growing rapidly. Firefighters are battling day and night to try to bring it under control, but it's spreading with such ferocity that it's making its own weather, creating huge clouds that are generating lightning strikes across the region. About a fifth of the fire's perimeter has been contained, but officials say the extreme nature of the fire, along with low humidity, is hampering efforts to quell the flames. People have been evacuated from their homes in several nearby counties. Smoke from the fire is travelling far and wide and is even reaching the neighbouring state of Oregon, where it's helping firefighters put out the country's largest blaze, known as the Bootleg Fire, south of Portland. A layer of smoke is blocking sunlight and creating cooler conditions, making it easier for firefighters to gain ground on the blaze. But the phenomenon, known as smoke shading, is unpredictable, and there are fears that high temperatures and wind gusts later in the weekend could fan the flames further. Efforts to bring this fire under control have been further complicated by an outbreak of COVID-19 among firefighters. Those who've tested positive are isolating and are said to be exhibiting mild symptoms. With a long, hot summer still ahead, these fires will challenge much of the western United States for many weeks to come. Peter Bowes, BBC News, Los Angeles.
Let's discuss this further. Dr. Patrick Brown is Assistant Professor of Meteorology and Climate Science at San Jose State University in California. Joins us now on BBC News. Thank you very much. Wildfires, first off. It is the season, or rather it isn't, because it has started fairly early, hasn't it? The conditions have been prime for the Dixie Fire in particular. Just take us through those.
That's right. So, wildfires are a natural part of our ecosystems here in California and in the U.S. West. But we've seen this long-term trend of increases in wildfire activity since the 1970s. And part of that is that our wildfire season is getting longer. And we definitely see that this year. We had a very dry winter, low precipitation. And so our vegetation and our fuels were much drier than usual, much earlier in the year. And so we've been actually running ahead of pace compared to our record-setting 2020 season so far this year in terms of fire activity.
Okay, so the key question here is what's put the US ahead of pace then?
So the long-term trend has to do with climate change due to burning fossil fuels. So burning coal, oil, and natural gas puts CO2 in the atmosphere, and that essentially raises all temperatures. And where it's dry, so in the U.S. West during the summer, higher temperatures essentially mean drier conditions. They mean the fuels, the vegetation is drier, and so then you can have you have more time to start fires, and you can have more severe fires when they do start. And the other, factor that's going on is that we have this century of fire suppression in the U.S. West. So ironically, suppressing fires has caused them to be much worse now than they would be otherwise, because we've allowed all of this fuel to build up kind of unnaturally in our forests, where in the natural state we had much more frequent low-intensity fires. Now we have this situation where it's much hotter and drier than it was before, and we have much more fuel built up so that when there is a fire, it can be much more severe and much more difficult to contain.
There are a couple of aspects of this particular fire that we're reading about. For example, the spot fires that have begun, the smoke shading, the pyrocumulonimbus clouds. But I'd like to go back to 2018, the Camp Fire smoke. You are a meteorologist. We saw that smoke go as far as Europe. We've heard reports of the smoke across the United States, but there is an element of it, some research that's been done about the 2018 smoke cloud that carried toxic particles and the effects it's been having. Are we likely to see the same thing? Because have these fires burnt in residential areas as well as the natural environment?
Yeah, so as fires become more intense, they release a lot more smoke, and we can see that on satellites. I mean, we definitely see it with the bootleg fire, smoke filling the entire, western state region, and so that's always going to be a risk, especially when fires move into areas where they're burning structures. Then you have, more opportunity for chemicals and things like that to get into the smoke, and so that's of course always a concern that it lowers air quality. And it depends very much on the local meteorology, whether or not the smoke kind of gets trapped close to the surface, or whether or not sometimes it can be trapped above the surface. And so that would be, obviously a much better situation for those people, for us living on the ground. But it depends on the fire, it depends on the day, it depends on where you are. But it's always a thing to be concerned about.
Yeah, it's that toxicity, isn't it, of those heavy metals that is the concern. Dr. Patrick Brown, thank you very much indeed. Thank you.